Arizona Territory, 1884. 13-year-old Mary was cast into the wilderness by her own father, pregnant and condemned as sinful. When Apache warrior Nokomish found her dying in the desert, his harsh promise, "Follow me or perish," became her salvation. She was barely more than a child, abandoned by those who should have protected her. He was a warrior grieving the loss of his own family. Together, they discover that sometimes the most unlikely people become exactly the family each other needs. Their bond would grow from survival necessity to chosen family during one transformative year in the Arizona wilderness. Together, they'd prove that love transcends age, race, and social convention when built on mutual respect and shared healing. Arizona Territory in 1884 remained harsh frontier where religious communities often dealt with moral failures through exile rather than support. Pregnant, unmarried girls, especially children, faced abandonment by families more concerned with community standing than individual welfare. Apache-Anglo relations existed in constant tension following decades of warfare, with mutual mistrust and violence shaping interactions between cultures. Individual Apache warriors often lived in isolation, separated from both tribal communities and white settlements by complex political realities. Desert survival required specialized knowledge that few possessed, making the wilderness both deadly threat and potential sanctuary for those fleeing social persecution. Water sources, medicinal plants, and hunting grounds were closely guarded secrets that could mean difference between life and death. Social conventions demanded harsh punishment for sexual transgression while offering no protection for vulnerable children victimized by adult exploitation. 13-year-old girl whose pregnancy resulted from adult exploitation that her religious community blamed on her rather than protecting her as victim. Her exile represented systematic failure of social institutions designed to protect children, but actually sacrificing them to preserve adult reputations. Despite her youth and trauma, she possessed inner strength and determination that enabled survival under impossible circumstances. Her defiance in challenging Nokomish not to abandon her showed courage that adversity had developed rather than crushed. Her pregnancy created additional vulnerability while also providing motivation to survive for her unborn child's sake. Her capacity for learning and adaptation proved that trauma hadn't destroyed her potential for growth and healing when given appropriate support and guidance. 30-year-old Apache warrior whose wife and infant son had died from disease, leaving him isolated from tribal community by grief and choosing solitary existence in remote canyon. His survival skills and knowledge of desert landscape made him uniquely capable of providing sanctuary to desperate refugees. His initial harsh approach to Mary reflected protective mechanism against further emotional attachment that might result in additional loss. His practical teaching style and refusal to coddle her showed respect for her potential strength rather than pity for her circumstances. His gradual recognition of her courage and intelligence began healing process that grief had interrupted, while her presence reminded him that life could include purpose beyond mere survival. Their relationship began with radical age and power imbalance that required careful navigation to avoid exploitation while providing necessary protection and education. External challenges included pursuing father, hostile prospectors, and harsh environmental conditions. Internal obstacles involved overcoming cultural differences, language barriers, and trauma from their respective losses. Most complex was developing appropriate emotional connection that honored both her youth and his grief, while building foundation for chosen family rather than romantic attachment. Nakamash's first encounter with Mary, dying in desert but still defiant enough to challenge his abandonment, revealed character strength that commanded respect despite her desperate circumstances. Her refusal to accept death quietly showed spirit that impressed him, even as her youth and pregnancy complicated any simple rescue. His harsh ultimatum, follow or perish, established parameters that acknowledged her potential for survival while refusing to enable dependence that would ultimately prove fatal. Mary's acceptance of his terms demonstrated wisdom beyond her years in recognizing that survival required accepting help even from sources her upbringing had taught her to fear. Physical awareness between them was complicated by her youth and pregnancy. He recognized her as person deserving protection rather than potential romantic partner. While she gradually learned to distinguish between masculine strength used for protection versus exploitation she'd previously experienced. Their initial interactions were practical rather than emotional. He taught survival skills while she proved her willingness to learn and adapt. Both approached their relationship as temporary necessity rather than foundation for permanent connection, though mutual respect began developing through shared hardship. Cultural differences created additional barriers as both overcame ingrained prejudices about each other's people through direct experience of individual character rather than social stereotypes. Trust developed through Nakamash's consistent demonstration of protective care without sexual exploitation. His respect for her physical boundaries and focus on practical education proved his intentions were genuinely humanitarian rather than predatory. His teaching style, though harsh, aimed at developing her capabilities rather than maintaining dependence. Mary's gradual sharing of her story and growing comfort with his presence showed healing from trauma that exile and abandonment had inflicted. Her willingness to challenge his decisions and express her own opinions demonstrated recovering sense of agency and self-worth. Their discovery of shared grief, his loss of wife and child, her abandonment by family, created emotional connection based on mutual understanding of pain and survival. The dried wildflower he carried became symbol of his vulnerability that humanized him beyond her initial fear. Physical comfort developed appropriately through necessary contact during survival activities, his teaching her to find water and food, medical care during illness, shared warmth during cold desert nights. Their relationship remained protective rather than romantic, with physical intimacy limited to what her age and circumstances made appropriate. The moment when she successfully treated his fever and caught food during his illness proved her growing competence while showing him that their partnership could be reciprocal rather than one-directional dependence. Mary's extreme youth created fundamental barrier to any romantic development, while her pregnancy added complexity about her capacity for emotional attachment versus focus on maternal responsibilities. Her trauma from whatever circumstances led to pregnancy required careful healing before healthy relationships could develop. Nokomish's grief for his deceased family complicated his ability to form new emotional attachments, while his cultural identity created potential conflicts with any long-term association with white. Child who might face social consequences, external threats from pursuing authorities or hostile settlers created constant pressure that prevented normal relationship development while forcing focus on immediate survival rather than emotional exploration. Language barriers and cultural differences required patient work to overcome while both dealt with trauma that affected their ability to trust and connect with others. Most challenging was uncertainty. About their future, neither could envision sustainable long-term arrangement that would provide security and growth opportunities for a pregnant teenager in hostile, frontier environment. Over months of survival together, Mary and Nokomish evolved from teacher-student to equal partners managing their desert sanctuary. Her growing competence in finding food, water, and medicinal plants complemented his hunting and protection skills, creating efficient partnership for harsh environment survival. Their collaboration extended beyond mere survival tasks to planning improvements to their canyon refuge and preparing for her approaching childbirth. Mary's suggestions about better shelter arrangements, while Nokomish's expertise about seasonal changes created mutual respect for each other's intelligence and capabilities. Most importantly, they began functioning as chosen family unit rather than temporary survival alliance, with both invested in long-term success of their partnership. The turning point came when prospectors threatened their sanctuary and both fought to protect their shared refuge. Mary's use of medicinal plants to blind their attacker while Nokomish defended them physically proved they'd become team willing to risk everything for each other's safety. Nokomish's sharing of his grief about his wife and son, followed by Mary's comfort and understanding, created emotional intimacy based on mutual healing rather than romantic attraction. Their recognition that they'd both lost everything and found new purpose in protecting each other marked transformation from individual survivors to chosen family. Their growing love was protective and familial rather than romantic, honoring both her youth and their unique circumstances. Physical connection remained appropriate to Mary's age and circumstances, protective embraces during frightening moments, shared warmth during cold nights, medical care during illness and approaching childbirth. Nokomish's respectful treatment of her pregnancy and physical needs demonstrated paternal protection rather than romantic interest. Their physical relationship was characterized by healing touch rather than sexual attraction, his gentle care of her injuries, her treatment of his fever, mutual comfort during grief and fear. Both understood that physical intimacy meant safety and care rather than romantic passion. When Mary went into labor, Nokomish's calm assistance during childbirth sealed their bond as chosen family committed to protecting new life they'd created together through survival and mutual support. The confrontation with Mary's father and his men created existential threat to their sanctuary when he arrived to rescue her from what he perceived as Apache captivity. His inability to recognize her contentment and growth created a dangerous situation where his prejudice threatened to destroy healing both had achieved. Legal complications arose from Mary's status as runaway minor, whose father retained legal authority despite his abandonment of her. Territorial law offered no protection for pregnant children who'd been exiled by religious communities, making her vulnerable to forced return to hostile environment. Economic pressure mounted as approaching winter required additional food storage and shelter improvements that strained their resources, while Mary's advancing pregnancy limited her ability to contribute to survival tasks that required physical exertion. Cultural tensions escalated when other Apache warriors discovered Nokomish's protection of white child, questioning his loyalty to tribal interests while potentially exposing their location to military authorities who might interpret their arrangement as hostile act. Most dangerously, the blinded prospectors' return with reinforcements created ongoing threat of violence that could destroy their peaceful sanctuary while potentially separating them through death or forced removal. To different locations. The approaching birth added urgency to all external pressures while creating additional vulnerability. Newborn infant would require protection and resources that made their isolated existence more challenging, while providing powerful motivation for defending their chosen family unit. Mary's transformation from traumatized pregnant child to competent young mother reflected healing power of appropriate protection and respectful education. Nokomish's patient teaching and consistent respect for her dignity helped her develop confidence and survival skills while processing trauma through secure relationship. Her evolution from victim of abandonment to active protector of their family showed growth that appropriate support could foster when combined with individual resilience. Love taught her that family could be chosen rather than merely biological, and that her value as person transcended society's judgment. Nokomish learned that healing his grief required opening his heart to new family connections while honoring memory of those he'd lost. Mary's courage and growth reminded him that life could include purpose beyond survival when shared with others worthy of protection and love. Together, they discovered that strongest families are sometimes built by people who've lost everything, but choose to create something new together, based on mutual care and shared commitment to protecting vulnerable life. The crisis exploded when Mary's father arrived with armed men, determined to rescue his daughter from Apache captivity and restore his reputation in Dust Creek community. His inability to recognize Mary's growth and contentment created violent confrontation that threatened to destroy everything she and Nokomish had built together. "You're coming home where you belong," her father declared, ignoring her obvious pregnancy advancement and health improvements under Nokomish's care. His prejudice blinded him to evidence that she'd found safety and purpose in their canyon sanctuary rather than captivity requiring rescue. The confrontation became life or death struggle when her father's men attempted to forcibly remove Mary despite her resistance and Nokomish's protective intervention. Their sanctuary, carefully built over months of shared survival, faced destruction through violence motivated by racial hatred and masculine pride rather than genuine concern for Mary's welfare. Legal authorities supported her father's claim despite obvious evidence that forced return would endanger both Mary and her unborn child. Territorial law recognized paternal rights over children regardless of circumstances that had led to separation or evidence of abuse and abandonment. Most devastating was recognition that their chosen family had no legal protection against biological family's claims. Even when biological family had proven harmful and chosen family provided genuine safety and support. The timing, Mary's labor beginning during confrontation, created ultimate crisis, where violence threatened both her life and her child's survival, just when she most needed protection and medical assistance. Going into labor during violent confrontation, Mary faced potential death from both childbirth complications and conflict between men fighting over her future. Her extreme youth made childbirth dangerous under best circumstances, while stress from confrontation increased risks to both her and baby. Her realization that she might die without ever seeing her child grow up, or that her child might be taken by a father who'd already proven his willingness to abandon family members who inconvenienced him, created desperation that transcended physical pain of labor. She channeled fear into determination to survive and protect her child, drawing on survival skills Nokomish had taught her while relying on his medical knowledge and protection during her most vulnerable moments, facing armed men while caring for a laboring teenager. Nokomish confronted impossible choice between fighting to protect his chosen family and providing medical care Mary needed to survive childbirth. His warrior training conflicted with healing responsibilities that required calm attention. His growing understanding that Mary's father would rather see her dead than dishonored by association with Apache man fueled rage that threatened to overwhelm tactical thinking necessary for protecting them both. Most painful was recognition that his love for Mary and her child couldn't overcome legal system designed to support masculine authority, regardless of evidence about individual character or circumstances that made such authority harmful rather than protective. When Mary's father's men refused to participate in violence against laboring teenager, witnessing the reality of childbirth and Nokomish's protective care rather than imagined captivity, the confrontation's dynamics shifted from rescue mission to recognition of genuine family bonds. Mary's successful delivery of healthy son, while protected by Nokomish, proved definitively that their relationship was life-giving rather than harmful. Her father's departure, broken by recognition of his own failures, left their chosen family free to continue building life together. Their survival of ultimate test validated their commitment to protecting each other regardless of external pressure or legal authority. The climax occurred during Mary's labor, when her father's men witnessed Nokomish's gentle, competent care during childbirth, while she demonstrated complete trust in his protection despite the chaos of armed confrontation surrounding them. The raw reality of new life entering the world amid violence created moment of clarity that cut through prejudice and legal abstractions. "This is what family looks like." Mary gasped between contractions, her hand gripping Nokomish's as he provided comfort and medical assistance no one else present could offer. Her obvious reliance on his expertise and care contrasted sharply with her father's claims about rescue from captivity. The birth of healthy baby boy, delivered safely under Nokomish's skilled care in their canyon sanctuary, proved definitively that their relationship was life-giving rather than harmful. Witnesses saw loving family protecting new life rather than savage captivity, requiring violent rescue. Her father's men, confronted with evidence of genuine love and competent care, refused to continue violent intervention. Their recognition that separating Mary from Nokomish would endanger both her and infant created moral crisis that legal authority couldn't resolve through force. Nokomish's handling of confrontation protecting his family while avoiding unnecessary violence, providing medical care under threat. Demonstrating character that impressed even hostile witnesses proved his worthiness as chosen father and protector despite racial prejudice. Most powerfully, Mary's naming of her child Adam Tayo, bridging both cultures while honoring their chosen family, declared her commitment to life they'd built together rather than biological family that had abandoned her when she needed protection most. The confrontation ended not through violence, but through moral victory, her father's departure as broken man who recognized his failures, while Mary, Nokomish, and baby remained together as family that had proven stronger than legal coercion or social convention. Their chosen family's survival of ultimate test validated every choice they'd made during months of building life together in desert sanctuary. Mary's safe delivery and recovery with healthy infant proved that love and appropriate care could overcome age, cultural barriers, and hostile circumstances. Legal victory came when territorial authorities, faced with evidence of successful family formation and infants' obvious health and safety, declined to pursue forced separation that would clearly harm rather than help all parties involved. Public support from witnesses to confrontation helped establish their right to remain together. Economic security followed community recognition of their success. Other families facing similar crises began seeking Nokomish's guidance about desert survival, while respecting Mary's knowledge of medicinal plants and child care, creating informal support network that enhanced their sustainability. Their canyon sanctuary became refuge for others fleeing social persecution, with Mary and Nokomish providing practical education about survival while demonstrating that chosen families could succeed when built on mutual respect and shared commitment to protecting vulnerable members. Most importantly, their family unit expanded by baby Adam Tayo represented triumph of love over systematic abandonment and racial prejudice. Both had found healing and purpose through protecting each other while creating new life that honored both their cultures. Their relationship had evolved from desperate survival alliance to chosen family bond that proved stronger than biological connections or legal authority when those failed to provide protection and support that vulnerable family members needed. Federal investigation of territorial policies regarding abandoned pregnant minors, partly inspired by Mary's case, led to reforms requiring community support rather than exile for children facing such circumstances. Their story helped establish precedents protecting vulnerable youth from family abandonment disguised as moral discipline. Educational impact spread through their example of successful cross-cultural family formation, demonstrating that individual character mattered more than racial categories when evaluating family stability and child welfare. Other mixed families found encouragement and protection through precedents their case established. Legal reforms protecting chosen families from biological family interference when biological families had proven harmful, influenced territorial policies regarding child custody and family formation, particularly in cases involving abandonment or abuse of minors. Their successful integration of cultural knowledge, Apache survival skills with settler medical and educational traditions created model for cooperative rather than conflictual relationships between cultures sharing frontier territories. Community attitudes shifted as their obvious success in child rearing and family stability challenged assumptions about cross-cultural relationships and appropriate family structures. Other unconventional families found increased acceptance following their example. Their story influenced territorial legislation protecting pregnant minors from family abandonment while establishing support systems for vulnerable youth rather than punishment that endangered both mothers and infants. 20 years later, their canyon had become established settlement where multiple families lived cooperatively, demonstrating that their success in creating chosen family had expanded into community model for inclusive rather than exclusive social organization. Within 5 years of Adam Tayo's birth, their canyon sanctuary had become established community of 12 families, most headed by couples who'd faced social rejection elsewhere but found acceptance and mutual support in settlement based on character rather than conventional credentials. Mary's expertise in medicinal plants and childcare made her community leader, while Nokomish's survival skills and fair judgment established him as respected elder despite his relatively young age. Their successful partnership became model for other couples building families under difficult circumstances. Economic development followed their community's reputation for successful cross-cultural cooperation, attracting trade relationships with both Apache tribes and settler communities who valued their diplomatic neutrality and practical knowledge. Their story influenced territorial policies regarding child welfare, establishing precedents that protected pregnant minors from family abandonment while providing community support for vulnerable youth facing crisis pregnancies. Federal legislation protecting abandoned pregnant minors drew directly from precedents established by Mary's case, creating framework for community support rather than punishment when families faced crisis pregnancies involving minor children. Educational programs based on their community model influenced territorial policies regarding cross-cultural cooperation, demonstrating practical benefits of integration rather than segregation between different ethnic groups sharing frontier territories. Their successful chosen family formation influenced territorial family law, establishing rights of protective non-biological families when biological families had proven harmful or absent, particularly in cases involving child abandonment or abuse. Legal precedents from their case helped protect other mixed families from interference by hostile authorities or biological relatives who sought to separate functioning family units based on racial prejudice rather than evidence of family stability and child welfare. 25 years later, their settlement had become permanent town whose inclusive approach to family formation and cultural integration influenced territorial policies preparing Arizona for eventual statehood with progressive rather than exclusionary social institutions. Their chosen family evolved into legendary example of how love could transcend every social barrier when based on mutual protection and shared commitment to vulnerable family members. Mary's growth from abandoned pregnant child to respected community leader, while Nokomish's evolution from grieving warrior to devoted father demonstrated healing power of appropriate family formation. They raised Adam Tayo, plus 4 more children who grew up understanding that family bonds are created through choice and commitment rather than mere biology, while respect for different cultures enhances rather than threatens family strength. In old age, they remained devoted partners whose chosen family had become foundation for entire community. True love recognizes that family is created through choice, commitment, and mutual protection rather than mere biology or social convention. The strongest families are sometimes built by people who've lost everything but choose to create something beautiful together.